So you've heard all these raving reviews about the Sony FX30 and decided to go get one for yourself. Great. But now you're about to go on your first shoot and you're realizing, I don't really know how to use this thing yet. Fortunately, in this video, we're going to go over 5 settings that you need to know how to use to maximize the potential of your Sony FX30. Now, I am speaking to the FX30 specifically here, but I have used the Sony A7IV, which I'm filming on right now quite a bit, and more recently the Sony FX3 as well. And I can tell you for a fact that a lot of these settings apply to most newer Sony mirrorless cameras or low-end cinema cameras. So even if things may be in a slightly different place in the menu, you're going to be able to take a lot of the same concepts that we talk about here and apply them to your camera, even if it's not necessarily the FX30. So I'm on set right now filming a media day, and the last thing you want when you're doing a shoot like this is for your camera to turn off in the middle of it. So in order to avoid that, I set my camera's tolerance to heat to high, and this makes sure that my camera doesn't overheat while I'm shooting. You can do this on your camera, like the FX30 or many other Sony mirrorless cameras. So to get to the heat tolerance settings, you just need to go in your menu to setup, power setting options, and then set auto power off temperature to high. And yeah, that'll do it for you. My lighting looks horrible right now, so sorry. But the second tip that I have to make the most out of your FX30 is use focus breathing compensation. This is a feature that some Sony mirrorless cameras have, though some don't, but the FX30 and the A7IV do have this awesome feature. And what it essentially does is digitally compensates for that small zoom in or zoom out that you get when your lens focuses from one subject to another subject who's either much further in front or much further behind. Then when you're focusing from one subject to another, you're not going to actually have a change in your frame, and there won't be a distracting breathing that causes your viewer to lose focus of the video and the message that you're trying to convey. So to turn this feature on, you go to shooting, image quality, lens compensation, and then set breathing compensation to on in your menu. Now, this feature also isn't available with all lenses. You need to be using a native Sony lens like this 20mm f1.8 that allow the focus breathing feature. If you have a Tamron or a Sigma lens for E-mount, it's not going to work with this. But if you have any Sony lenses, make sure you're using focus breathing compensation with them because it makes your image look a lot better. So one of the new Sony features that I absolutely love is the touch tracking autofocus feature. So this is a new feature that's come out in a lot of recent Sony mirrorless cameras, and it's on the Sony FX30, it's on the A7IV, it's on the A7S3, that basically allows you to touch a subject on the built-in like flip out screen on your camera, and then the camera will automatically use its autofocus to track that subject wherever they move. So I use this a lot of time in my work if I'm filming a player and they're moving from one side to the other, maybe they're weaving through things and I want to make sure that they stay in focus all the time. This is a really easy way to do that. It's also really useful if I'm filming an interview and maybe I have multiple cameras and I can't watch them all the time, or maybe I have a subject who's prone to going backwards and forwards like how I'm doing right now. And because I'm using touch tracking autofocus, I stay in focus and I don't really need to think about it, which is awesome. So if you want to turn this feature on in your camera, you can just go to the setup menu, choose touch operation, touch function in shooting, and then select touch tracking. And then whenever you touch a subject on your screen, they're going to be tracked until you click the middle button in between the scroll wheel to make it stop. Really useful feature, probably one of the newest features that I got when I bought my A7IV and FX30 that I've been using most frequently, and I just think it's like one of the most widely usable, functional, useful features on these new Sony mirrorless cameras for people who shoot video. Now, for my work in sports, I usually like to film at longer focal lengths. I can't always necessarily get close to the action, especially when I'm filming a sport like football on a bigger field. And to be as mobile as possible and get around a stadium and film different vantage points, I usually like to film handheld. It just keeps my rig small and lets me get from one place to another place easily. But it's not always easy to film handheld at long focal lengths and keep your shots stable. So the fourth menu setting that I love using on my Sony FX30 when I'm filming is active stabilization. You can use active stabilization on your Sony FX30 by going to the shooting section of your menu and then selecting image stabilization and active. Now, active stabilization does have a 1.1 times crop compared to standard stabilization. So this is going to punch in to your footage a little bit. And because of the crop in 4K 120, there are some modes such as that where you can't actually use active stabilization, but active stabilization really does make a big difference when you're filming handheld. It's very noticeable when you are using it versus when you aren't using it. So I usually do have it enabled. And for sports specifically for myself, I find that a lot of the time the crop in is actually really nice because I can usually use the extra reach to get a tighter shot of my subject that I wouldn't be able to do otherwise. So if you find yourself filming at longer focal lengths, often like 200 millimeters or longer, or even if you're filming at wider focal lengths and just doing tracking shots handheld without a gimbal, and you want to get nice, smooth, non-shaky footage, or maybe you just need to crop into your footage for some reason, active stabilization can be a really great tool to do that, and it's one that I take advantage of quite frequently. Now this final setting can be an absolute lifesaver for later when you're editing, especially if you don't have a great computer or you're working with really high resolution files. A lot of Sony cameras, the FX30 and A7IV included, allow you to record lower resolution files of whatever high resolution video you're filming. And then later in your editor, these lower resolution or proxy files can be reconnected to your higher resolution media so that you can edit and assemble your video together using lower resolution videos, which is less stressing on your computer and allows you to work faster without any delays. This saves a ton of time because instead of having to make proxies later on your computer, you can have your camera make them for you on your SD card, and then when you're importing all of your footage to your computer, you can grab your already made proxies and just start working with them. If you want to see a little bit more about my specific proxy workflow, I do talk about it in this video right here. I have timestamps in the description of that video so you can go and check that out. But I enable proxies in my camera by going to shooting, image quality / recording, proxy settings, and then I toggle on proxies and select the proxy file format and the proxy record settings that are best for me. Now it should be noted that some filming modes don't actually let you record simultaneous proxies in camera. On my FX30, I can't, at least not with the SD cards that I use, record proxies simultaneously in 4K 120 frames per second. And depending on the camera and the cards that you're using, the modes that you can and can't record proxies in are going to vary for you. So I recommend getting some fast cards, seeing what modes actually work for filming proxies if you need them, and then make sure that you're using a camera and fast enough cards to record proxies for the video codec that you want. So those are 5 of the settings that I use with my Sony FX30 to create high quality videos and have my shoot days and edit days flow smoothly. There are a ton of different settings in the Sony FX30 or any other Sony camera really menu that you can take advantage of to make your shooting better and optimize your workflow. So if you like this video and you want to see me discuss more of those, then make sure to subscribe and let me know in the comments, and then you won't miss it when I do make that second video if there's a demand for it, of course. If you have any other tips about this, also just drop them in the comments so everyone else can learn from each other and we can all start using our cameras better, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.